This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
Today on CityCast Chicago. This week marks 1 year since Brandon Johnson was inaugurated as Chicago's 57th mayor. We were able to catch the mayor for a quick minute to reflect on his first year in office and his plans for CTA, affordable housing, the Bears, and more. It's Monday, May 13th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Obviously, we could do a whole episode on any one of the topics we're going to talk about today, but we want to touch on some of the biggest issues you've come across in your first year and what we'll be watching in the next one. So welcome back to CityCast Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Colby. I appreciate the time.
So I've been following a lot of your first year interviews, and a lot of folks go with the exact same question I was going to go with, which is, you were a teacher. If you had to give yourself a letter grade, but you've been avoiding giving yourself a letter grade. You usually say things like, we've expanded workers' rights, moved away from tip minimum wage, more paid time off. We haven't raised property taxes. We're opening mental health centers, right? More money in the budget for my progressive policy. So if you were watching from an outside observer and the mayor of Chicago had done those things with the challenges we're going to talk about today, what grade would you give that mayor?
I would, first of all, thank you for highlighting all my accomplishments. I don't know what else we can talk about now.
we got a lot to talk about.
I would say that, we are off to a really good start. We are. And, the assignment that I have to build a better, stronger, safer Chicago is not over. And so that's why I talk, very candidly about the additional work that we have to do. This assignment is about, turning in your work in the short term, but not losing sight on what the ultimate goal is.
In those first quarter grades we give our students, that's what we usually tell them, right? This is a long game. You got more to go, but this is just a small token to say where I think you are right now. So Mayor, is that an A? Is that a B? Is that a C?
Well, I think we're defining quarter differently. I mean, I'm defining quarter as my first term.
Oh, okay. I see what you're
saying.
You
get what I'm saying? So, if you come back to me in 3 more years, then I can say, look, here's what we wanted to get done in the first quarter. Remember, I'm going to be here for a little bit.
That's what you say.
I'm looking forward to the opportunity to continue to build a better, stronger, safer Chicago. But we're off to a good start. And the end of this quarter, which will be in 2027, I'll be happy to release grades. Until then, we're going to continue to do the work that I promised I would do, which is investing in people.
And speaking of that work, probably the thing we hear about the most from listeners is the CTA. Complaints about reliability, cleanliness, maybe some safety on trains and buses. I know you've heard this, so I have to ask you straight up. Are you considering changes at the CTA anytime soon?
Well, I've said from the very beginning that a reliable, affordable, accessible transportation system, is the standard. And what we have seen in this first year, in terms of violent crime on CTA, there's been a reduction, and we're building a safer platform for people to feel safe riding buses or riding the train. Our hiring is up. We have hired, over almost 1,000 workers last year. I think we actually did hire 1,000 workers last year. So that's putting us in a better position to have a more reliable system.
Do you feel confident in the job? I mean, these metrics are great, right? We're still a little bit under those pre-pandemic numbers, right?
That's
Hiring
right.
is up, but it was at a record in terms of turn down. And so, right, we're trying to measure what that net gain really looks like. I mean, are you confident in Dorval Carter and the leadership right now, the people we're appointing to transit boards? Do you feel confident in these people?
Well, I'll just add that the better streets for buses, it's also a major part of the work that we have done in this first year. And, what I am confident in is that, the full company of people who have surrounded me in this moment for me to become the mayor of the city of Chicago have made it very clear: affordable, accessible, reliable, predictable, safe public transportation. And
Hmm.
we're building towards that. And as far as, again, specific personnel issues, I don't discuss those publicly. I don't find that to be productive, and I think it's actually quite inhumane to do that. So when there's a decision that's going to be made, and I appreciate that people want to know specifically who I'm hiring and firing. The point that I'm making is that I have a vision for transportation, and when there are decisions, and if and when there are decisions to be made regarding who can actually help carry that mission and that vision out, I will make that public to the people of Chicago. But in the meantime, we're going to continue to do the work that I promised that I would do when I became mayor just a year ago.
For sure. And I do trust that. I wonder, when you're making these decisions, what are you evaluating? Because, I feel like when people are doing a great job, we give them a lot of praise. If I say you got a lot of confidence in someone, you're like, yeah, man, I really feel good about what they're doing and the choices they're making. But then, just to be nice, when we don't have confidence, we just sort of say, hey, I feel good about everything that's going on and the full vision. So what are you evaluating when you're looking at the success of CTA and the leadership positions right now?
We're looking at ridership. We're looking at
Hmm.
ridership, and as as you've said, before I got a chance to say it, that ridership is ticking up and it's heading in the right direction. We're looking at public safety. We still have work to be done, but crime is down on our public transportation system. We're also looking at key initiatives, right? And one of those initiatives is actually hiring people. We're doing that.
Hmm.
We're also looking at, again, building better infrastructure for our buses, so that they can move through the city a lot faster. We're doing that, right? And there's still work to be done. I mean, we have financial challenges that we will confront, and we are, and I've been doing it in a variety of areas, running the city of Chicago, and this situation is no different. So I
Hmm.
will continue to evaluate and assess, like I do all of my department leaders, our commissioners, um, our sister agencies. I will continue to evaluate that. And I do appreciate the fact that there are so many people that care about public accommodations. This is something that I've been very much aligned with over the course of my career, whether it's transportation, education, healthcare, jobs, housing. These are the critical dynamics that ultimately will ensure a better, stronger, safer Chicago. And just like all those other entities, I'm going to invest in our public transportation system because it's critically important to transforming our city.
Hmm. What have your recent rides been like? Your recent experience on CTA?
Honestly, those rides are a little bit different than when I was a county commissioner. Obviously, I have a little bit more company. I mean, just straight up, right? So I used to ride the train far more regularly. When I was a county commissioner, I never used my parking spot downtown. I was true to the green line. That is the line that's closest to me. And what my experience has been is that you can clearly see, where the ridership is up. You can see that. You can see the diversity of our city and how the young people use public transportation and are, on the same line, with a corporate, leader who is taking the train, downtown. Um, you also see, the workforce. I mean, it's a diverse workforce, but to be perfectly, you know, blunt with you, is that the black workforce is strongly represented in CTA. So these are just some of the things that I've observed over the course of my first year in office. When I do get the chance to ride the train, that ridership is up. You see the diversity of our city, young people and working people. You see the workforce that is reflective of the neighborhoods, and those are good signals that we're headed in the right direction.
Another defining experience of your first year has obviously been the growing numbers of migrants and asylum seekers sent to Chicago from the southern border. More than 41,000 asylum seekers have arrived in Chicago since August 2022. Just under 8,000 are currently in city-run shelters. What have you learned over the past year as your administration responds to this housing and humanitarian crisis?
Well, this operation that I've built in the city that's centered around people's humanity, has been met with real challenges, and primarily because, you have Congress, and particularly the Republican Party, where they refuse to work with Democrats to actually pass substantive immigration reform. It is becoming increasingly clear that you have one particular party that is just determined to create chaos for their own, their political ambition. And, despite all of that, we built real structure and order and calm around this mission. When I was elected and I was sworn in a year ago, there were individuals sleeping on floors in police stations and airports. We had contracts that I inherited where taxpayer dollars were primarily being eaten up by the vendor. And there was no real benefit that the people of Chicago, or I shouldn't say benefit, there wasn't an opportunity for the people of Chicago to actually provide direct service to migrants. We've changed all of that, right? And so we saved the taxpayers over $200 million. There are no individuals sleeping on floors in police stations. We brought sister agencies to the table, the Chicago Public Schools in particular. Over 17,000 students conservatively are being served in our public school system right now, who are individuals seeking asylum.
Depending who you ask, apparently.
Yeah, of course. Right. So some people 11,000, some people say 17,000.
But in the point you're making now, this is probably one of the places we've seen the most fluctuation over the year, from neighborhoods resisting new shelters to the Brighton Park encampment that never happened to, enforcing a deadline for people to leave shelters. Right. So the strategy, which has definitely gotten people off of police station floors and people out of the airports, has also gotten them into some senses, precarity in terms of our temporary housing structure. I mean, is there anything you'd wish you'd done differently or earlier in this case? Obviously, you had to build things from the ground up, but as you've learned over the last years, where are some places you think you might have made some changes with regard to the housing fluctuations?
Well, look, we've had decades of disinvestment in these neighborhoods that have also borne the responsibility of supporting migrants. Right. I mean, this is the reality when you've had previous administrations who refused to respond to the people who were closest to the pain. And that's why I committed $250 million to support the unhoused. For the first time in the history of Chicago, we have a chief homelessness officer to better coordinate those services across departments, sister agencies, community-based organizations, the faith community, the philanthropic community, the business community. Right. I mean, these are investments that that I'm intentional about. It's why I put forth this $1.25 billion bond deal to build homes, to ignite economic development and workforce development within these communities that have been grossly underfunded and, quite frankly, neglected. So in terms of what I've accomplished in this first year, everything that I promised that we would do is that we would address every single crisis, none of which I've created. But I said we were going to address them and respond to them, and we're doing that. The fact of the matter is you have a governor of the state of Texas who is determined to create chaos.
I was going to say it is likely to send more buses and planes as the Democratic National Convention approaches this summer. I mean, there have also been allegations that the city is going to try to move migrants away from downtown ahead of the convention. I mean, between the DNC, between this desire to political grandstand from Republican governors, which I, and the public can see out in the open. I mean, how do these two forces come together in a way that you feel like you can manage? What is the strategy there?
Well, we can't control what the governor of Texas does. But what we can do is we can operate what we do have control over. Not one bus has come to Chicago since the end of December. Not one bus from Texas has arrived in the city of Chicago since the end of December. And that is in part due because we created an ordinance calling on the city of Texas, the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, to actually work with us. If you're going to send folks from the border, then you have to work within the confines of this ordinance. He refused to do it because he's not interested in working with anyone.
I mean, what about around Chicago?
That's what I'm getting at.
Buses
And he's sending those buses to the suburbs. He's sending them to the suburbs. Because, again, this is not about coming up with a coordinated operation. This is about the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, working to create chaos. It's a real affront to our democracy where you have someone who is, ostensibly in a position to swear to serve and protect, is doing the opposite of that. We have continued to work with the state, the county. We've all come together to help resettle these families. Over 41,000 families, as you said, have arrived. This is unprecedented. It's the first time in the history of America where a local government is being asked to establish a resettlement operation for migrants. It's not sustainable. I've said that from the very beginning. The government, the federal government, Republican Party in particular, have to show up, go to work, pass immigration reform policy so that we can begin to deal with this mission. Because global population shift is going to continue whether there's a DNC or not. This mission doesn't go away because the DNC has an expiration date. So we have to prepare ourselves for what is inevitable, where there will be ongoing efforts of people who are suffering in other countries, in large part because of bad foreign policy. They're going to look to escape to find somewhere of refuge. And whether it's in Europe or whether it's in the Western Hemisphere, they're going to look for refuge somewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, for those new arrivals, Chicago is now the place they're living. They're going to school. They're raising their families. They're building a new life here, but the city can't grant work authorizations or change their immigration status, as you've mentioned this entire time. So how is your administration working to make Chicago feel like home for these individuals?
Well, as you mentioned, unfortunately, we have a number of families who won't qualify for some of the federal support that other migrants have received. And so we're going to continue to push the federal government to actually provide work authorization because these families do want to work. They want a life here in America, whether it's in Chicago or anywhere else. And the federal government has a responsibility to do for migrants arriving from Central and South America, as they did for individuals arriving from the Ukraine. There are 30,000 Ukrainians in the city of Chicago right now, all of whom were supported by the federal government. And so clearly the responsibility is on the federal government. However, what do we do in the meantime? We're going to continue to do what we've been doing, bringing the state, bringing the county together to provide health care, temporary living, temporary shelter for these families, and then helping them get resettled. There are communities of Venezuelans in particular that are being established, which also provides some support for these families. That was the biggest challenge, that in other places, there are individuals from particular regions that already have people who are settled. And you have an entire community that is, available to help with that transition. For Venezuelans, they have not been afforded that because, this is sort of one of the newer, migrant flow from this particular country. So we're going to continue to provide the support that we can, even with the limitations that we have. Still making critical investments in the neighborhoods that have been starved out, while also making sure that we're providing support for individuals who are seeking refuge here.
You made youth employment and engagement a big part of your campaign last year. It's been a part of your investment and policy strategy. And we're also coming up on a third year of a downtown curfew. Do you have a plan to lift the summer ban on unaccompanied minors in Millennium Park?
Let me just say, first of all, thank you for highlighting the fact that there is a real strong commitment of my administration to young people. We hired almost 25,000 young people last summer. That was a 20% increase in youth employment for summer jobs. I added an additional $76 million to this year's budget. So that's going to put us in a position to hire as many as 28,000 young people this summer. There's a youth commission that we've expanded where young people, participate in regular organizing and hearing directly from them of how we can build a better, stronger, safer Chicago. Those advisors are actually compensated for their time as well with a stipend. As far as this particular curfew, I'm reviewing it. Look, we have to create more safe spaces for our young people to hang out. I've been spending a considerable amount of time with just seniors and juniors around the city, and every single school that I've had the chance to interact with students, they all say the same thing, whether it's on the south side or southwest side, southeast, west, north, northwest. They need safe spaces and safe places.
What do they
And
say
that's why
about the
we're
ban?
working.
What do they say about the curfews?
Well, that's
Which
what I'm getting at. That it's
Mhm.
not just about this curfew. It's about where do we go, right? Because at some point you're going to have to go home. As my mother would famously say with folks who would come hang out with us. And so it's not just about reviewing this curfew. It's about where do young people get to go so that they are safe. And that's an issue that we have had and has gone unaddressed again for decades. I've been in office for 1 year, addressing climate crisis, this migrant mission, the unhoused, making sure our young people are heard, workers' rights, all of these things that have been ignored and neglected for 40 years. I've had
but does
1
the
year to
but
lead.
does the
And
does
what
the
I'm saying
does the
is,
curfew and ban send a counterintuitive message that says
look, it's not something
like
that I
in this
supported.
particular safe
It's not something
space?
that I supported. What I'm saying though is
Hmm,
that even once you lift it, if that is something that we do, it doesn't solve the bigger issue.
for
Where
sure.
do young people go? That's the bigger issue. Where can young people go to feel safe? That's what we're creating. How do we make sure that young people are in a position to have a productive life? That's why we're creating jobs. It's why I'm investing in public education. This is not simply about whether you get in the house at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 9 o'clock. This is about where are you going? How is it helping to fulfill your purpose? That's what my responsibility is. Look, I'm raising a family. And I can tell you, as a parent, as much as I want to make sure that my children have flexibility to be able to move about as they wish, I want to know where they're going. It's not about just them being out, it's about what they're doing. And if we're not providing opportunities for our young people to be in safe spaces, to work, to find their purpose, to find fulfillment, then we are not living up to the expectations and aspirations that I'm hearing directly from young people.
Mhm. The last thing I want to ask you about, which I think in some ways connects even to this, because it's also about building out new potential public lands and space, which is the $4.7 billion proposal to build a new Bear Stadium on the lakefront. I've gone on record saying I'm a sucker for mock-ups, and them things, they look good, but we also know that a lot of that potentially could be borne by taxpayers, maybe not in new taxes, but in terms of where our tax dollars are allocated. And you were just out in Springfield pitching this to state lawmakers, but with everything that we've talked about today, how does building a new sports stadium fit into your agenda?
Well, first of all, um, we have a 100-year-old building that is hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, and it's an asset that we don't benefit from. It's of course it's a doesn't have a dome, and if the Bears aren't winning, that's even less games there, right? So the problem that was created before I got here has ultimately led the city to an asset that we can't benefit from.
Hmm.
What the Bears have proposed, they have proposed to build this $3.25 billion stadium that they would put in over $2 billion, and that the remaining balance for the stadium would be built by visitors. So the visitors, of course, that are coming to hotels to hang out in Chicago because we're the greatest freaking city in the world, that's ultimately how this stadium is being paid for. It's being paid for by visitors and ownership. If there's someone that has a better solution to the proposal that the Bears have put forward to address this 100-year-old building that is no of public benefit, no public use, if someone has a better proposal for that, then they should provide that or present that. And so what this project ultimately does is it creates not just a response to this problem. It's not just a solution to this problem, but it's also a public benefit and public use. We're talking about 20% more green space where outdoor graduations and soccer games, football games, baseball games, outdoor events can take place. We're talking about a 365 usage space that the ownership and visitors would pay for. It also creates 43,000 jobs regionally and 23,000 jobs within the city of Chicago. What I said was any investment that we make should be of public benefit and public use, and it should create opportunities for people to gain income. That's what this proposal has put forward. Now, are there things that can still be looked at and negotiated on? Of course, because it's a proposal. Mm-hmm. It's nothing set in stone. And so it is very much aligned with what the people of Chicago elected me to do. Create mm-hmm. public benefit, public use, solve problems that predate me, and making sure that it does not come at the expense of everyday Chicagoans.
Mm-hmm. Is there any route you think going forward where I understand that the larger plan asks for public infrastructure changes, but do you see there being any route where the Bears could do this by themselves?
Well, look, every other deal that has been negotiated for stadiums in Chicago was either financed 100% by the public or 2/3 were financed by the public. This particular proposal, the Bears pick up 72% of the cost, and the other costs are paid for by visitors. If someone has a better scenario than that, they should propose that, because the individuals, and some of whom were here when those deals were being negotiated, had no problem creating these bad deals. Mm-hmm. And here's one that is completely the opposite of what previous negotiations have looked like as far as infrastructure we needed for the entire city of Chicago. The Biden-Harris administration has put forth the largest investment in infrastructure in the nation's history with the Inflation Reduction Act. So the ask for infrastructure is not just for this major attraction, which is the museum campus, which, by the way, is one of the top tourist locations for the entire state of Illinois. So we wouldn't just be providing infrastructure for this particular area, but we need infrastructure on the west side, the south side of Chicago, particularly the southeast side, where there's real environmental hazards that we are dealing with there. Mm-hmm. So it's not the work that I've done in this year. I've taken a very complex system that inherently favors the interest of corporations, and we've opened it up where millionaires, billionaires, everyday working people now have a seat at the table. This is unprecedented. There's no other administration that can tout the diversity that we have. We have the most diverse administration in the history of Chicago. 60% of my workforce are women. We've managed to bring the airlines together. We're making critical investments in the Loop, where we're taking old office spaces and turning them into living corridors, of which 30% of them will be affordable. Where else are you hearing in this country the words downtown and affordable in the same sentence? So it's not just singularly responding to a particular dynamic or issue, i.e. the Bears. It's about how does it fit the overall vision for the city of Chicago to make it better, stronger, and safer.
All right, so the mayor has thrown out a lot of numbers in this conversation, but that one about how much the Bears will be paying definitely stood out to me. And with a promise to put up $2 billion, yes, it's true. The Bears would be covering roughly 70% of the cost of the stadium alone. but the total price tag goes up when you add those infrastructure improvements. And while Johnson and the city argue that those improvements directly benefit the rest of us as taxpayers, the Sun-Times recently reported that the bill goes up again when you take into account debt costs related to renovations at Soldier Field and Sox Park that we still paying off. Plus, there's still a lot of questions about what the terms of a new lease would be. At this point, you have gone through a lot, right? We've talked through a lot of challenges, a lot of accomplishments over these years. So I'm gonna ask you one more time. If that all of those things we just talked through, your Mayor Brandon Johnson if that was Mayor Jacoby Cochran, what grade would you be giving that opening swing to a first quarter, right? Even if it's the first quarter of the first quarter, you know. Where I'm at, Teach. I'm just trying to know where I'm at, Teach, so I can make some changes and some improvements so that my final grade is as good as possible. Where I'm at right now, Teach.
So that's a fair question. Here's what I can say, because I still won't offer you up a grade. I can offer you up some context. It's like a rubric. So when you say, where are we? This $1.25 billion bond deal that I have to execute over the next 18 months or so, when we're digging shovels and then when we're cutting ribbons, until we get there, we still have more work to do. Look, homicides are down, shootings are down, but we still have way too many people who have access to guns, and it's causing a tremendous amount of trauma. And speaking of which, we're providing more behavioral health care services in our neighborhoods, and that includes opening up 2 mental health clinics. And when those mental health clinics are open and people are actually utilizing those services, then we'll go to the next, the next juncture of where we need to get to. And like I said, each quarter within the quarter, since you're gonna break it down like that,
and you know the teacher. Part of this story is so big. You knew the grade question was coming, and you decided, you know what? I'm not a teacher anymore, and I'm not your student. We ain't talking grades, and I appreciate the strategy on that. If you would entertain me on one more thing, right? By the end of this month, we might, according to my producer, we're gonna be squarely in summertime shot. What are you looking forward to? What are the exciting things on your calendar that got you excited? Because again, we could talk forever about the challenges. What are the things that you're excited for this summer? Well,
the summer festivals that exist in Chicago are really second to none. So I'm really looking forward to all the neighborhood festivals. Of course, Lollapalooza, Taste of Chicago, the Gospel Fest, Blues Jazz Fest. You got Neighborhood Fest, right? That
you're gonna go welcome Chief Keef back to Chicago. The last couple of mayors didn't want him nearby. He coming back after 10 years. You gonna go give him a video like this is Mayor Brandon Johnson, Chief Keef. You know what I do not like? People who don't want to invest in progressive policies. You gonna give them a welcome video?
Well, look, I mean, it's amazing to see, that, there are people who are working hard to restore their standing with the people of Chicago. Obviously, there's still a lot of work for Chief Keef to do around that. But, what I can say, though, that showing up for, our young people in the neighborhoods, that's something I'm very excited about. Obviously, man, there's a lot to be excited about as it relates to our sports teams, at least a couple of them. Chicago Sky. I'm looking forward to them having
the Chicago Barbie now.
The Chicago Cubs. I mean, they're hanging in there. Got some bullpen issues, but it looks like they're going to be competing all summer. So between our neighborhood fests, between showing up in the neighborhoods, of course, and then, of course, rooting for our sports teams. Those are the things that I'm going to be looking forward to. And of course, finally, man, just spending some time with the family. I'm looking forward to, my boys are engaged in summer activities. My daughter, for sure. So I'm looking forward to their recitals and all their events that they'll have coming up too. So let's have a great summer.
Mayor Brandon Johnson, we appreciate you so much here at CityCast Chicago. Obviously, hearing from our elected leaders are important. And so the person, at the top of City Hall, making time for us, it means a lot.
Hey, you got it. Anytime, man. Keep up the great work.
Hey, I'm going to hold you to that anytime, man. If you want to come back quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter. Now, while the mayor wasn't willing to give himself a grade, we went ahead and did. For that and more context on some of the issues we talked about today, head over to our website, chicago.citycast.fm. And while you're there, subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. Of course, I can't let you go without some good news. I'm going to see some of y'all tonight at Call and Response Books, the new independent bookstore in Hyde Park. I'm going to be sitting down and talking about We Are the Culture with Ariane Nettles. Hopefully, I'll see you there. If I won't, I will be back bright and early tomorrow, so I'll talk to you then. Peace.